So it feels like every vlog for the past few weeks has been from a place that I'm not really too familiar with or don't really go to very often. And the next couple of vlogs coming up are going to be like that as well. So today's theme is the bread and butter, the standard, the casino that's 10 minutes from my house. Almost every Saturday night, you can find me right here at Morongo Casino, gambling it up in the 510 streets. And that's exactly what's on the menu for tonight. I'm about to get in there right now. It's like 5 p.m.-ish, and it looks like they're gonna get that first table of 510 going. So as per usual, the plan is to play some interesting hands and report back to you guys. So far on the vlog, the last couple of months have been pretty good to us. So maybe today we could find some more of that run good on the vlog. As for myself, I've actually been kind of break even the last month or so. I don't really document every session I play. For the few of you out there who didn't already know that, maybe 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 sessions I actually end up filming. So the off-camera reports are nothing too exciting. Hopefully today it's a little bit different and we can capture some interesting hands. Before we get into the cards, I wanted to remind everyone, some people, man, just no consideration. I wanted to remind everyone that my next trip is coming up at the end of this week to Cleveland and Detroit. I'm going to be stopping at Jack Casino this Friday, the 20 whatever. It's right here on the screen, okay? I don't know the dates. I'm going to try to start a 5-10 game, at the very least a 2-5 game. So for anyone who's in the area and wants to come hang out, you're more than welcome to come help me start a 5-10. I hear they don't get it too often, so it would be pretty cool if we could get one of those tables going, but I don't know. Like I said, either 2-5 or a 5-10 would be more than okay with me. All right, that's it. Enough talking. Let's get inside and play some cards.
Alright, so, do you guys see that boy sitting on my right? Nice looking young man with the pale hands, shuffling chips right there. Yeah, well that guy, his name is Matt, and he's actually my roommate. Now, away from the poker table, Matt and I are good friends, good buddies, everything's fine. But for some reason, when we sit at a poker table together, it's just bloody warfare. As I think it probably should be with good friends. So in the first hand I get dealt, I have ace-king, Matt opens, I raise him, and he ends up folding. Now the very next shuffle is what you're going to see here on camera. Once again, Matt opens to $30, and I raise him for a second time in a row with 6-5 of clubs on the button. Action folds all the way back to Matt, and he puts in the re-raise to $300. Now, because of what I just said, this could be a variety of hands, including Queen Jack, Ace-10 suited, Ace-5 suited, and just a bunch of other random stuff. Obviously, it's going to include aces and kings and, real hands, but it's also going to consist of a ton of other crap that I'm just not having any of. So I decide to rip it all in for $1,500 effective. Not recommended, not advisable, but it happened, so I'm just relaying this story to you guys. We're going to get a lot of folds from hands that are obviously better than 6 high, but not good enough to call an all in. This time though, that is not the case. He snap calls, so that sucks. It means he actually has a real hand this time. But it turns out, not really a big problem for us because the flop brings a 5 and the river brings another 5. So when Matt shows pocket kings, sorry man, 3 of the same card is always going to be better than 2 of the same card. And I don't think I've ever been more proud of the way I played a hand. If you guys want to outplay your opponents like this, just shoot me an email and we can set up some coaching. Alright, moving on to the second hand of the night, trying to play normal poker now. Under the gun opens to $25, there's 2 callers behind him, and I look down at King Jack of clubs in the big blind. I would sometimes contemplate putting on the squeeze here, but because the raise came from early position, and also from a player who refused to straddle and bought in for the minimum, I decided just flat and see what happens on the flop. Cards come out and it's King Queen 8 Rainbow. I check it, the pre-flop raiser now bets $100, the two players behind him fold, and action gets back to me. Pretty dicey situation already. To be honest, I wouldn't mind folding it right here and now, but I decided to just call one time and see what happens on the turn, which is the Queen of Diamonds. Nothing to do here but check it to my opponent once again, and this time he decides that a pot-sized bet wasn't quite good enough. Let's make it a little over pot with an all-in of $360. Pretty annoying spot here because on one hand, it feels kind of ridiculous to just call the flop and then fold on this turn card. But on the other hand, I can't really think of something worse than King Jack that plays this way, especially from someone who I perceive to be a tight player. So after thinking it over for a bit, I just shrug and end up making the fold. In the third hand, we see an under the gun limper, and I look down at 9-6 of spades in late position. I raise it up to $40, probably questionable to try and isolate someone with this hand, but this guy in particular was playing very straightforward, and I feel like I could profitably play this one in position. So anyway, I make it $40 and get called by the big blind and under the gun limper. So three ways here to a flop of Jack 4 deuce with 2 spades. Action checks to me, and with a 9 high flush draw, seems like a good amount of outs, but not a ton of showdown value. So I decide to continue betting, make it $85. The big blind makes the call, but the under the gun player gets out of the way. So heads up here to a turn card, which is the 4 of diamonds. Once again, he checks it to me, and I think this spot is kind of close. I don't really want to check back 9 high, but in general, it's not a good idea to continue bluffing when the middle card pairs, as my opponent will have a 4 much more often than I would be betting a 4 on the flop. So considering that, I end up just checking it back and hoping to realize some equity. River card is the Jack of Hearts, so the board is now double paired. But once again, my opponent checks it over to me, and now I think I do want to go for a bluff. It's kind of a ridiculous run out to represent something really strong. But at the same time, I feel like he could easily have missed draws himself, which 9 high obviously cannot beat. What I want to do here is put in a small bet and target folds from all those high card holdings. Obviously, we're never getting a full house to fold, so because I'm just targeting that weaker portion of his holdings, I decided to bet small, make it $105, and it seems to get the job done because he folds fairly quickly. In this next hand, I decide to make my life a little easier, and instead of playing 9-6, upgrade all the way to pocket aces. Unfortunately, we're three-handed in this one, and the button makes the fold. So it's on me in the small blind. I raise it up to $30, not really going to be chopping between the blinds in a three-handed game, and luckily the big blind defends. So heads up here out of position to a flop of 10-6-4 with 2 hearts. Actually could mix in some checks here with aces, especially black aces, but this time I decided to continue betting for value. I make it $50, and the big blind calls. Turn card is the 8 of hearts. This time I slow down and check it since, there's 3 hearts and I don't have any of those. Once he checks it back, I feel like we very likely have the best hand. So when the river card is the 5 of spades, even though any 7 makes a straight and there's plenty of 2-pair combinations out there, I decided to go for some thin value and just target a 10. If we get raised, it's going to be a pretty easy fold, but if he calls, we most likely will win. Even though I think he probably would just call with some smaller 2 pairs, I would be much more disappointed if I checked here and my opponent checked back a 10, which we could have got some value from. So I put out $150, and he thinks it over for a while before eventually deciding on a call. I show it down, and indeed it's the best hand, so nice to get a couple of more chips here at the end.
I'm convinced that I'm cursed, you guys. I'm just convinced because every time my camera dies and I set it down to charge, somehow I end up playing a ridiculous hand, or at least an interesting one, even though it only takes like 20 minutes to charge this thing. It happened at Commerce. It happened at some other place. I can't remember which vlog it was. And now, third time's the charm. Of course, I set this thing to charge for just 10 minutes, I think. And somehow I found a way to not only play one interesting hand, but 2, of course. So anyway, you guys are just going to have to settle for my stupid face instead of the usual table footage, all right? But can't really go on in this session without at least explaining what happened in these hands. So here we go. In this first one, we are 4-handed, and the first player to act, he makes it $60. Action gets all the way to me in the straddle, and I have ace-5 offsuit. I think you're supposed to defend pretty much any ace here, so I make the call, and we're off to a flop, which comes down amazing with this hand. 9-5-5. So we flop trips. One of the very few good flops you can expect with this hand. I check it over to him. Unfortunately, this time he checks it back. We're off to a turn card here, which is the Jack of Hearts. And now I think it's time for me to come out and start betting, much like I would with, say, Queen 10 or 10-8, maybe a flush draw, a bunch of other stuff that just isn't good and needs to start bluffing. So with trips, I'm definitely going to be doing that as well. So I put in a bet of $90, and luckily my opponent makes the call. So we're off to a river card here, which is the unbelievable last 5 in the deck. So we end up with quads. And it's a question of whether we want to come out and bet for value or check and hope that he puts some money in the pot. And I think even though it's kind of tempting to just check, because obviously we don't want to blow him off his hand since we have, 4 of a kind and all that, it's important to remember that we would be bluffing with a ton of stuff here. With made hands, I think it's important to stay a little bit balanced. So I decided to put in a big bet, much like I would with, for example, Queen High. I put out $300 and my opponent starts thinking about it. I'm hoping he makes a light call down here with a hand like Ace King or maybe Ace Queen, but he ends up not calling and also not folding. Instead, he announces a raise. He says 300 is not enough and announces a raise to $900. At this point, I think it's apparent he's got an overpair, but he's only got like $400 behind, so there's really no size considerations to be had here. I move all in and my opponent snap calls. Obviously, we're good here, so I just show it right away. And he flashes me pocket kings. So for the second time tonight, we end up cracking kings, both times using a 5, which I think is interesting. So yeah, a pretty big pot, probably the biggest one of the night so far, and can't really ask to run much better than that. Moving on to the second interesting hand, which again, somehow happened in like a 5-minute span. This time we are 7-handed, and I look down at King Queen of clubs in the under the gun position. I raise it up to $60, and action folds all the way to Matt, who decides $60 is not enough. He puts in the raise to $250. He started the hand with around 4,000, and I cover him. So with a suited Broadway in position, I think it's more than okay to continue, even though we're most likely behind here, but that's all right. Let's see a flop, which again, just shows how genius my decision is to continue defending these middle tier hands. Comes down King Queen 9 with 2 diamonds. Even better news is that Matt decides to continue betting here. He puts in, I think, 175 or maybe 200. Don't think a raise is terrible, but he could still have hands like pocket kings, pocket queens, and even at a small frequency, maybe Jack 10 suited. So I'm happy to keep ranges wide and just flat call here. So we're off to a turn card here, which unfortunately brings in the flush. The reason I say that's unfortunate isn't necessarily because I would expect him to have one. In fact, with the King of Diamonds out there, I think he's going to have very few, but it's just going to make it more difficult to get value from hands like aces or Ace King. But I'm still going to try. So when he checks it over to me, I put in a bet of $450, and I'm happy to see that he puts in the call. So we're off to see one last card here, which unfortunately is the 4th diamond. So now our hand strength goes down dramatically, and I somewhat expect him to lead at some frequency, at least on this card, because he's going to have the Ace of Diamonds a little bit more often than I would, but he decides to check it. At this point, I'm just happy to check it back, and he has pocket aces of the black variety. So we're taking down another pot and cracking these big overpairs like it's nothing. Kind of upset that I was unable to capture these hands on camera since they were some pretty big pots. And I guess technically speaking, I could just be making all this up. So it's up to you whether you want to believe me or not. But there were people there. I mean, there are witnesses. I'm playing against real people here, okay? But anyway, we're back up and running now, full battery. Let's get back in there and hope to continue this run good streak.
Alright, so camera is back to life here after having been fully charged, and in this next hand we play a $25 bomb pot, which we typically do in this game the first hand of every new dealer. Anyway, in this one I'm in the big blind looking down at 8-7 offsuit, and the flop comes down Queen 8-5 with 2 diamonds and 1 heart. Small blind checks, I check it, and it actually ends up checking all the way around. Turn card is the 3 of diamonds, which I think is a pretty decent card. Because if anyone had a queen, they probably would have bet the flop, and if anyone had a flush draw, they probably would have bet the flop as well. So when the action gets to me once again, I think an 8 rates to be the best hand the majority of the time. I mean, yeah, sometimes a 3 will give someone like 2 pairs or whatever, but for the most part, I think an 8 is going to be good enough to bet for some protection here. So I put in a $65 bet, and I get called by the hijack and the button. 3 ways here to a river card, which is an interesting one. It's the 7 of hearts. However, I don't think there's a ton of value here betting into 2 opponents. I did suspect that when I got called on the turn, it was mostly going to consist of draws. So I actually decided to check it here and see what my opponents decide to do. The hijack checks it, and now the button decides checking is not going to cut it. He puts in a bet of $250, and now the action's back on me. And by no means do I think this is an easy call, but I didn't play my hand this way just to fold the river. So I end up calling, not necessarily knowing if my hand is best or not. The player behind me folds, which I'm more than okay with. And then I hear some magic words from the button when he says, "You're good." So I just flip it over. As you guys know, I'm not really interested in making people show losing hands. And we're taking down our first bomb pot of the day. In the next hand, the straddle is on. We see an open from the hijack to $60. The button makes the call, and then the action gets to me in the big blind looking down at ace queen. Could mix here between putting in the raise and just flat calling. Given that the open came from late position and the button just flat called, I think we're incentivized to put in the raise with a hand that's most likely going to be the best hand here. So I make it $280. The hijack makes the call, and now the button makes the call again. So 3 ways here to a flop in a pretty juicy pot already, which comes down queen 9-8 all clubs. Definitely mixed feelings about this one, because even though we flop top pair, my opponents could easily have jack 10, flushes, 9-8 suited, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, etc. So given that we're out of position against 2 opponents that could easily have some better hands than mine, I decide to check it, and luckily both of my opponents check it back. Turn card doesn't really help things. It's the jack of spades, so now any 10 makes a straight. Another check seems in order, and somehow it checks all the way around again. The river card is like bad to worse. It's the 4 of clubs. So now there's 4 clubs on the board. I'm just handcuffed at this point, so I check it for a 3rd time. Hijack checks it, and button checks it back, and somehow, some way, my hand is the best hand. So as I'm pulling in this pot, wondering how neither of my opponents put in a bluff at any point, I don't even have time to wonder that, because the very next shuffle, I look down at ace king of spades in the small blind. Action folds all the way to me. The straddle is on in this hand, so there's not going to be any chopping going on. I raise it up to $60. The big blind gets out of the way, but the straddler calls. So heads up here to a flop of king 7-3 with 2 hearts. Once again, we flop top pair, but unlike the previous hand, this board seems a lot better to try to go for some value on. So I put in a continuation bet of $60. Once again, the straddler makes the call. Turn card looks great to me. It's the 3 of spades. I see no reason to slow down here, so I put in a bet of $225 this time. And once again, the straddler makes the call. So we're going to see one last card here, which comes out the 5 of spades. And my opponent only has around $600 behind at this point. And there's nothing to do here but move all in. I mean, if he's waiting in the weeds with pocket 7s or something like that, bless his soul. But what I think is more likely is he's got a hand like king queen or king jack. So I put in all the money, and my opponent goes in the tank, which is always a good sign. Don't really want to get snap called in this situation, but for sure want to get called nonetheless. And after a few minutes, that's what ends up happening. I show it down, and my opponent flashes king queen. Pretty much a dream scenario here, getting ace king versus king queen on a king high flop. And even though it seems simple, it's something that doesn't really happen too often. So happy to take it and happy to get the max. In the next hand, the straddle is on once again. Action folds to the button, who raises it up to $80. And then I look down at pocket 10s in the big blind. Definitely going to be putting in a raise here, especially versus what could be a wide open from the button. So I make it $310, and the button makes the call. Flop comes out jack 3-3. Very dry board, and one that I'll probably be betting pretty much all my holdings in this situation for a small size. So I put in a bet of $205, and the button makes the call. Turn card is the king of hearts, and now there's 2 cards bigger than my pocket pair, so I decided to check it this time, and my opponent checks it back. River card comes out the ace of hearts. Pretty much done with it at this point. I check it for a 3rd time, and my opponent checks it back right away. Given how the hands played out, I think we could easily have the winner here against like a smaller pocket pair that calls on the flop against a small size, but not the case this time. My opponent shows jack 9 offsuit. Pocket 10s, not going to cut it this time. Moving on to the next hand, in which the straddle is on once again. Matt opens a small blind to $50. He's been quiet, trying to make a comeback from getting completely outplayed by me with 6-5 of clubs earlier. I look down at ace 10 next to act in the big blind. I put in a raise to 160. It's probably fine to just flat call here, but he's going to be opening pretty wide in this situation. And on top of that, if I just flat, then I'm giving a really good price to the straddle behind me to play pretty much any two cards since the raise was only to $50. So anyway, I make it 160, the straddler folds, and Matt calls. So we're going to go heads up here to a flop of queen 10-6 rainbow. He checks it over to me. Being that this is a pretty advantageous board for me, I decided to just put in a small bet, make it $100, and Matt makes the call. We're off to a turn card here, which is the 7 of hearts. This time when he checks it to me, having middle pair top kicker, I'm happy to just check it back and see what he wants to do on the river, which comes out the 4 of diamonds. Now he decides checking is not the play. He puts in $375, and given how the hand's played out so far, he's not really representing much. So after thinking it over for a few seconds, there's just too many possible bluffs, especially from Matt. So I put in the call, and indeed he announces ace high. And in case you guys haven't been keeping track, that's 3 for 3 versus Matt in this vlog. Honestly, man, you should have just helped me with chores around the house more. Maybe tonight would have gone a little different. Anyway, shortly after that hand, it was starting to get pretty late, maybe around 2 a.m. So I decided to rack up and call it a night. I hope you guys enjoyed the hands.
I don't know what it is about bringing out the camera, but every time I film myself playing poker, I run like top 5%. And honestly, it kind of paints this unrealistic picture that I win all the time and I run amazing all the time. Sessions like these are not common whatsoever. Like I said at the start of this vlog, so far I've been like break even this entire month. And this is the first time that we've kind of broken past that plateau. All that being said, I had a great time tonight. As is often the case when you win like 700 big blinds or some ridiculous amount, I was in for $2,000 and cashed out for $8,930. 7.5 hours played and almost a $7,000 win. Absolutely no complaints to be had. And on top of that, I'm actually pretty content with the way I played today, except for the first hand. Obviously, just terrible, no matter how you look at it. But hey, I never claimed that this was an educational channel. It's just for entertainment, all right? It's just a dude explaining why he does all the random shit that he does, okay? You guys tuned in for this. It's not my fault. Anyway, next vlog is going to be coming from Ohio, Cleveland to be exact. After that, I'll be going slightly north to Detroit, playing at MGM Grand. And yeah, it should be good content. At the very least, a chance to meet a few of you. And for those of you guys who are not locals to those areas, at least you have the videos to look forward to, right? So anyway, that's a wrap for today, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you watched all the way through, you know I appreciate it. If you gave it a thumbs up, I also appreciate that. It helps the channel continue to grow as it's been doing so far. And that's a wrap. Until next time, guys, thanks for tuning in. Good luck at the tables. Peace.